when I was doing my A-level English, I remember having turned in an essay, which was like a story we had to write. And my daughter was very young at that time. She was like newborn and within the first year, and I was off with her because she hadn't been very well.
Hello and welcome to Obehi Podcast. I'm your host, Obehi A14, and I strongly believe that everyone has a story to share. Now let's get started into this episode.
And I'd written this story and sent it in. And I remember I was still off with her within the week. And a couple of days later, the lecturer turned up at my house and, wanted to speak to me about my piece and was really encouraging about becoming an author. But again, back then, that was, I had no connections within the industry. I didn't know how to go about these things. And life just really took over. But it's always been an interest. And back in between 2009 and 2013, I decided that I would go and take a second degree after my father had been badgering me about it every day for 10 years to, take this English degree. And so just to keep the peace, I did it. And it was the best thing I ever did. Whilst I was taking the degree, I realized probably within the first year that I was going to actually use this rather than my first degree, which I didn't use at all. And I said I was definitely going to use this and I was going to transfer these skills into being an author. Within 2 years of being and studying, I was given the opportunity to work as a sub-editor for a local magazine. And that's how the publishing started. So I actually became a publisher before I became a publisher before I became a writer and certainly an author, but I had published my own work a few times within this magazine on a very small scale. I was quite a shy and retired writer because I didn't come from the industry, so I wasn't too keen to be ridiculed or have my work sort of poked at, etc. So I published a few times. I would say it was about 3 or 4 times in this magazine that I was editing for, and I think I worked there for about 2 years prior to leaving, and just before I left to embark on this journey full time, I was editor-in-chief for that magazine, which gave me all the editing and publishing skills that I needed.
I have a lot I'm going to have to ask you there relating to publishing because, like I said before, our demographic need is, our community need it. I mean, the African diaspora, we need a lot of it, no? You look at the life of Marcus Garvey. One of the area where he managed to tap more into the community was publishing. It is very important that we pen down what we are thinking in our head, no? Of course, because that is the way we communicate. It is very important. But before we get there just now, I'm interested in what kind of book were you even reading? Which were the book? Was there any type of book, or were you having some certain topic that were more interesting for you as you were beginning to love reading?
To be honest with you, there's a vast majority of a wide range of books that were available to me. I liked autobiographies where I could really get to learn more about a person, or anything that was non-fictional. And just going back to the point that you made as well regarding Marcus Garvey, it's such an important point that you raised there, and something that a message that I like to convey regarding publishers and writers and authors of that type, because that's the reason why I'm even in this business. It's because of people like the people you mentioned, Marcus Garvey, Nelson Mandela, who I've had the pleasure of meeting, also other people as well, like Nadine Gordimer, who was a white South African writer. And, whilst those people may have experienced some sort of censorship, I do believe that writers that come after them have a great onus to write the truth, because especially on behalf of people that have opened the doors for us in terms of their censorship, where they could have either been killed or have been imprisoned or have had their books banned or burnt or worse. If you look at places like North Korea, where this is still very much the regime, etc. I think it's very important that the writers that are currently writing today that are in the industry are writing authentically and are writing realistically and are telling true stories.
That's very interesting. So you happen to meant Nelson Mandela. What circumstances for that? Do you want to say anything about it?
Just to say that it was a very fleeting experience. When he came to London on on the first visit, he stopped in at Brixton, and my daughter would attend a nursery there. And on the day that he arrived, I was with my daughter because they were going to sort of be there as part of the celebrations. And out of all the thousands and millions of people that were there, I'll say thousands, there was quite a few of us that were there. He spotted my daughter and came over and spoke to us. So, and it was just an acknowledgement. But I mean, of all the people that was there, to think that he had spotted us, I mean, it's just absolutely surreal and a moment that I will never ever forget. I will also say as well that when I was younger, I've met other considerable people, such as Bob Marley, but I was too young to know, to be able to expand any more on those meetings.
That's interesting. The other day, that should be like 3 weeks ago now, I think, I interviewed a British author. Her name is Catherine Fletcher, who wrote a book about the Black Prince of Florence, Alessandro de Medici. So the conversation was really very long that we had here in this podcast. And at a point, I enjoy what Catherine was saying, relating to the writing of history. It means there is a lot that goes into it, a lot of digging, it also means a lot of sacrifices sometimes. Of course, we know historians in the past who have had to lose their life because they reported what the society didn't want to hear. Because truth is very expensive sometimes, no? Then I was also telling her during the conversation that this is why I think that African people should never expect the European to tell their story, because it is not possible, because there is too much sacrifice involved in it, and there is too much emotion in it. So I think it would be wrong for Africans to expect other people to tell their story, because you are going to have to dig it out yourself. You're going to have to shape the narration yourself. You're going to have to add all the flavor according to your sensibility to it. That is why I also like the conversation that I'm having with you just now, because it is in the area that is very sensitive. Yes, please go.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I would also say that there are other people, such as Nadine Gordimer, who was central, to shaping apartheid, and she was a white South African. And to be fair, I don't know how apartheid would have been today without her input, because to be fair, at that time, she would have been taken probably more seriously as a white writer than a black writer at that time. It would have had different connotations. And even though her books may have been banned and she would have gone through some hardship, at the end of the day, she was still under the white privilege. So for her to take ownership of that and responsibility for that and tell the truth, no matter how ugly it may appear, was a huge, huge sacrifice on her part and a huge benefit to society. And, for those reasons, I suppose that she received her Pulitzer Booker Prize winner and received that award, as a result. So, other authors are probably not aware of this, but it's because of those controversial writings, which has probably paved the way for authors like myself to be able to be successful within the industry today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much for pointing out that is very important. No, it is true that we usually do not have time to analyze a story, so we go by approximation. No? That is what we can do, because if we were to take out even one word, it would take more than a dictionary to explain it. No, but in the overall statement, it simply means that we do not expect other people to tell our story, because it is not possible to do that. And like I said before, a lot of emotion is involved in it. Of course, that doesn't mean that there are no Europeans who can make a significant contribution to the telling of African story. But that is too small.
They can't tell the true story.
Exactly. It's too much of an involvement. So The only people
Well, they'd have to have the experience, of being, held to apartheid and going through some of these enslavements. They would need to be privy to that, whereas they weren't really. They were more witnesses, and involved more or less in the apartheid by being separated, rather than actually being a victim of it. But I suppose in a way we all were victims of it, by not having that interaction together where blacks and whites couldn't mix, just like we've seen, in previous histories in America, history states there, when they had the separations, etc. And even in this country, back in the 50s, etc. And things have obviously evolved. But like you quite rightly said, there is a lot of emotion. And I think even for maybe Black people, it's not so much that we want to go over what's happened to us in history, but we want it acknowledged, and we want it respected more so.
If you enjoy this podcast, make sure you subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. I remain Obehi Ewafo. Thank you so much for listening and talk to you in the next episode.